Hello and welcome back. In today's video I'll be restoring another Byzantine Anonymous issue. This has been a coin that I've been meaning to get around to restoring for a while, so I figured it might be interesting to make a video around it. Usually in a large lot of coins, I decide what to work on based on what first grabs my attention, and this one in particular felt really interesting due to the fact that the flan is pretty large, but also we can see some details already showing through the dirt. To figure out if this was a project that I wanted to tackle, I did go ahead and remove the top layer of dirt off camera, just to make sure that there was a decent strike underneath and that it was worth spending the time to make a video around. So just as I work through the mechanical cleaning process with the scalpel, I'll go ahead and fast forward as I progress through that first pass. Just because a straightforward clean of these takes about 6 to 10 hours, most which are spent doing much of the same process, which is just removing surface dirt and looking for clues as to what that coin might be. Whereas the last video is a bit more of an intro to mechanical cleaning, moving forward I think I'm going to treat these more akin to cleaning journals, a place where I can catalog and talk about my process in cleaning and my thoughts around each coin. As before, I start the process with soaking it in distilled water for about 2 weeks, and then move directly into applying light passes with the scalpel. As I work on the obverse and I get it to a point where I'm kind of happy with it and I can start seeing some of the details, this will leave some of the more stubborn dirt on the surface to deal with. And I feel like a lot of people get stuck at this step. Usually progress goes really fast when you start, and then as you get further and further down into the details, it becomes a little bit harder to remove that last 15–20%. What I'm going to be doing this time around is I'm going to be doing an alkali wash, which is something that I've been experimenting with lately. It doesn't work for every coin, every type of deposit, but the idea would be that I take a 3 to 5% solution of sodium sesquicarbonate, and I'll soak it for about half a day to a day, and usually just in between mechanical cleaning passes. And I just monitor the coin and I make sure that there's nothing happening on the surface that is concerning, that the patina looks nice and healthy. I'm also looking at the color of the water. If it starts to tint towards blue, that might be indicative that there is some bronze disease present or some other corrosion byproducts. And then yeah, between those soaks, I'll just go back and I'll do another layer of mechanical cleaning. What I find is that the dirt loosens a little bit. Some of the more stubborn stuff tends to loosen up, and then it makes it a lot easier to get it off of the coin with my scalpel while not having to apply a bunch of pressure onto the surface of the coin, which is, again, something that we want to avoid. So for this video, because I'm tackling a bit of chemical work, it's worth noting that yes, there is a chemical component to cleaning. It's not necessary. You can do a lot with mechanical cleaning, but in some cases it will make your life a lot easier, or it'll make the process a lot faster, or it will actually reduce the amount of potential for damage onto the coin. Now, not all chemicals are equal. The chemical that we're going to be using today, sodium sesquicarbonate, is not super dangerous, but I treat all chemicals in the same way, which is I use eye protection, I use gloves, I work in a well-ventilated area, and generally just maintaining a high degree of cleanliness and safety when you're working with these chemicals. It's nothing that's really caustic or dangerous per se, but this is just how I approach it, and I would suggest that if you are thinking of using these methods as well, do your research, look up the material safety data sheet for what you're using, and generally just figure out your comfort level towards the level of safety and precautions that you take working with these chemicals. So the obverse is looking pretty good at this point, so one of the ways that I check my work as I go along is I'll just dab a little bit of water on the surface just to check how well that detail is coming across. Generally when I'm cleaning, sometimes it feels like the coin gets slightly worse looking, as all of the dust and dirt from the cleaning starts to slightly obscure the details. Adding a little bit of water over top not only cleans the coin, but also temporarily darkens that surface and makes it a bit shiny, so I can check how those surfaces are coming along. Everything's looking great, so I think we're good to move on to the reverse. I find that the reverse on this type does take a little bit longer than the obverse. The reason for this is generally the strikes are a little bit deeper and we just have a lot of lettering to deal with. But it's very rewarding, I think, especially if you get like a nice solid strike on the reverse. If you spend a bit of extra time to really get those details to shine, they do really come across great, especially on camera. So it can be very easy to get discouraged with the amount of lettering that you have to deal with. But I do find that it is very satisfying whenever I get to the end of the cleaning process on the reverse and then I see the result of my hard work up until that point. Now I'm going to use a new tool, at least to me, which is a broad chisel tip. This is something that I've also been experimenting with a little bit lately, just to get that top layer of dirt off fairly quickly. Now, I wouldn't use this on smaller coins. I wouldn't use this on coins with a delicate patina, and especially not for like a secondary pass or a details pass. I would always still just use my regular scalpel for that. But to get rid of that top layer of dirt, so far this has been saving me a lot of time. So as I move through the process, I'll just speed up the clips and cut to different points in the cleaning process. Everything is basically the same as what we've covered, same tools, same technique. Obviously, I break this up into many different sessions over a large span of time. With the magic of editing, of course, we bring all those clips together and it looks like one big continuous clean, but realistically, I do these over the course of weeks and months. To that point, I personally treat it more as a meditative practice. I really like doing this after work in the evenings just to relax and unwind. And there's also just something about just working through these surfaces and just bringing those details back to life that's very satisfying. And as we come to the home stretch here, I'm just cleaning up those last few edges. One thing that I did notice is near the bottom of the reverse, there were some naturally occurring scratches and irregularities. All this means is that when you're doing the cleaning, just to take a little bit of extra care not to further damage the patina in those areas. The flan crack was another one of those areas that I was a little bit concerned about starting the coin. All that meant is that I had to just put a little bit less pressure than usual when cleaning. Now, obviously, when I clean, I use very little pressure. So I try to rely as much as possible on my tools and just do very gentle passes. This was just an extra reminder to not put more pressure than is absolutely needed because I didn't want to risk widening that crack further. And really the last stage is just one final cleanup pass, which I'm probably going to do off camera. And then I'll do photography, and then I will give it a very light coating of Renaissance wax, which basically will just help protect the coin moving forward, but also it'll give it quite a nice sheen. I really like the specularity that it gives coins. Of course, this is not to everyone's liking, but for those who don't like Renaissance wax, it can be easily removable with acetone. So I see it as a very non-destructive step, and it just helps bring out the best of the coin, in my opinion. So it's time to see the result out of the photo booth, and I am quite happy with how this turned out. I think that the surfaces are great. I think there's a decent amount of detail that is still remaining on the coin, especially considering that this is dating to between 1028 to 1041 AD. So considering how old these coins are, it's great to see how much detail there still is on the coin. Again, this is attributed to Romanus III or Michael IV. I heavily recommend to look up the story between these two emperors because it's very interesting. I found it fascinating. Of course, it would take a long time to cover this, and this is more of a coin cleaning video, but heavily recommend that you do check out the story behind those two. And yeah, really happy with the results. So thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you in the next one.